Welcome to Graceful Healing, a podcast to get straight talk about healing and living again. My name is Maureen Lake. I'm a holistic health coach, speaker, author, and thyroid disease fighter. Each week, I'll be bringing you graceful conversations to inspire you to seek new ways to hit the reset button to catapult your health and vitality to new levels. Listen in and open your heart to all the new possibilities. Are you ready? Let's do this. Angela is the creator of Vulnerability Warrior. She has an online program for people going through major transitions, like career changes, divorce, the death of a loved one, or even facing an empty nest. Really for anyone who's seeking to achieve higher levels of personal success. Angela has an uncanny ability to uncover people's strengths and then position those strengths or use them into lasting change. I can't wait for you to learn more about Angela Stillwell. Let's do this. Welcome, everybody. I can't wait for you to meet Angela. She's the creator of an online program for people going through major transitions, like career changes, divorce, or even a death of a loved one. Anybody is capable of going through this program if they just want to achieve higher levels of personal success. The thing that I found out about Angela is she has this uncanny ability to uncover people's strengths and then position those strengths into lasting change. And I can't wait for you to learn more about her. Welcome, Angela. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm excited to be here with you.
Thanks. So let's get right down to your story. Please share with us your personal story, your journey, how you ended up where you are today. We'd love to hear it.
Sure. So how all of what I'm doing now came about was during a divorce several years ago. You know, you go through this. I was married for 22 years by the time the divorce was final. So it was no short-term marriage. And while going through the separation and the divorce, I started doing, the introspective work that so many of us do when we go through that, right? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What can I change going forward? What are the things that we personally can affect? I can't do anything about what the other person did or did not do, but what did I do? And I really thought that I had dealt so well with my quote unquote dysfunctional childhood. and I realized that instead of really dealing with it, what I had done was compartmentalize it and build these walls up. And I knew, I joked and said that I was a master wall builder from the time I was a small child. I was also a master compartmentalizer as well, evidently, because what I was doing was, people would connect with me, but I wasn't really connecting with them. My parents were divorced young. There was a lot that was going on with my dad. Then my mom remarried and married an abusive man. And there were just a lot of things. We moved a lot. I went to 13 different schools. So I was never required to connect with anybody. I knew I wasn't going to be there long enough. And, there's a lot of, as kids can be hard on other kids, particularly girls on other girls. And there's a lot of shaming and that sort of thing. And so I just learned to never open up and share any of that stuff with anyone. And that carried into adulthood and into my marriage. And I didn't really realize what an impact that had until I was doing that introspective work. And as I really started doing more of the personal development and really learning how I could be more open and what were the things how did I really want my life to look? What did I really want my relationships to be like? And who did I need to be in order to have that happen? And then once I started doing those things and I saw what my relationships and what my business and everything looked like, I thought, gosh, you know what? Now that I'm really sharing myself with people, my relationships, my business, everything became so much better. My relationships got deeper, more authentic. I was no longer afraid to share who I was or the experiences that I had been through. And that sounds, as an adult, we still act like we're on the playground, you know?
Yeah.
It's the adult version of the playground.
Exactly.
So I thought I have to figure out how I can take the processes that I have been through and use this with my clients. Because I was doing freelance writing and marketing consulting and some things like that as I was going through the divorce. I had sold a business prior to that and wasn't really building a business while in the middle of the divorce. But then after the divorce was over and really started building, I was like, I really have to take this to my clients because I really see a need. And it was interesting because what started happening right around that same time frame were all of these books getting published about storytelling and using your story. And so I kind of went down that path and I was like, oh my gosh, this is, big revelation all the way around. Right.
Right.
And so as I started doing that with my clients, they started having major breakthroughs as well. And that's how the program Vulnerability Warrior came about, which is for individuals. And then Untapped Strengths is, we'll call it the corporate arm of that process and those trainings and workshops that I do through that. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that you worked in the corporate field too with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I go in and do workshops and do consulting work.
Oh, wow. Who is hiring you on that end? And what's the purpose of it for? Is it just to get along better with their, I don't know, who they're working with, or maybe their clients, or maybe all of the above?
It's been all of the above. I have worked with C-levels to better connect with their direct reports. Oh. I've worked with sales teams to better connect with their prospects. It's been all of that, entrepreneurs to better connect with themselves, their families, and their clients. And what happens is people talk about B2B, but B2B isn't really B2B. It's person to person. It's just in a business environment, right?
Right. That's so true.
So it's the same processes. It's just how do you apply that in business? Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I love going in and doing workshops with businesses, and I've done it in the traditional corporate world, and I've done it in service industry.
I find what you're doing fascinating, and the fact that it actually came out of something that I know was really difficult to divorce. My parents were divorced as well, and I know it's not easy at all, but that you were able to turn something like that into helping other people and even helping people in the business world. That's awesome.
I've always been very resilient. With my childhood, I didn't really have a choice but to be resilient. Well, I guess I had a choice. I could either, let it crush me, or I could opt out of the situation, right?
Right.
And I always chose to opt out. I was going to keep leveling up. And yeah.
That's great. So can you share with us some of the key lessons you learned along this journey that you've had? I know for me personally, 10, 15 years ago, my mindset probably I didn't even have any then. I wasn't even aware of changing your mindset, at least cognitively, right? I'm sure I did it a little bit underneath my layers, but it took my own personal journey as well to get to where I am today. So if you could share some key lessons that you learned along the way and how it helped shape your current mindset, I'm sure my listeners would be just as fascinated as I am.
Oh, absolutely. And you're not alone in only discovering it recently. Now I sit at these events and I hear these people talking, and they're in their teens or their 20s. And I just think, oh my gosh, you have such an advantage by getting this now.
Isn't that the truth?
Oh gosh. I mean, there are times I sit there and I'm like, I am so envious of where you are right now.
I feel the same way. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah. So the key lessons that I have found, one of the biggest ones, and I would say this is something that it's victimhood versus victimized. We all have things that happen to us, but you don't have to be a victim, right?
Right.
You can be victimized, but you don't have to live in that victim mindset. And I learned an easy phrase, actually from Tony Robbins. And he says, what if you could shift just one little word? People always say, this is happening to me. What if you shift that to, this is happening for me?
Mm-hmm. Powerful.
And when you make that little mind shift, that's huge, because then you can always find the positive in it, right? You're no longer in victim mode. You're now, okay, this has happened and I can come out the other side of this with something positive. So that's the first one. Change to me to for me.
That's huge right there.
The second one is, people think of vulnerability as weakness. And when I realized how much strength it took to be a vulnerable person, I realized there's a quote by Freud that says, out of our vulnerabilities, we will find our strength. And there's a saying that Pastor Rick Warren at Saddleback Church, he says, there is no courage without fear. It's the same thing. There is no strength if there is no vulnerability. Even in weightlifting, the way that you bulk up your muscles is by tearing the tissue. There's a vulnerability there, right?
Right.
And so to have that mind shift from, oh, I have to be big and strong, I can't be vulnerable. Well, no, you can't be strong if you're not vulnerable. That's the second biggest lesson. And then I'd say the third biggest lesson is that being vulnerable isn't about dumping. And by dumping, I mean, just sharing everything. That's not being vulnerable. That's therapy work. Yeah. That's something to do on a couch with your therapist. Yeah. Being vulnerable is about bearing your heart and sharing yourself with others who have earned a right to be shared.
Oh, I like that.
And when it's a situation, that doesn't mean that you won't get hurt going through that process. It doesn't mean that that person who has earned the right may not use that against you. They may, but being vulnerable and sharing yourself is not about, just tearing it all out and sharing everything. Here's all of my ugly truth. It's about sharing it in a way that can share the lesson and can share the emotion, and doing it with someone who's earned the right to be there with you.
That's really powerful. I love just that one statement, that's earned the right to be there with you. Because, there's so many people that just dump stuff on you, whether you want to hear it or not. They don't even really, they don't have necessarily a filter at all. And you're just kind of, you're actually the victim then. But to really have someone share with you that is there to really hear you and listen with you and be vulnerable right alongside of you in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And when we are vulnerable, it gives other people permission to also be vulnerable. Everybody feels like they have to walk around being perfect, particularly women. There's this huge sense of perfection that we all have to meet, have this business, have great kids, have a perfect house, look perfect, dress perfectly. Everything has to be perfect. And reality is there is no perfection. And when we allow our true, vulnerable, authentic selves to be seen, we allow other people to also be seen. And that's why it connects so deeply.
That's so true. And I know I've been guilty in the past of having like this perfect facade. People think, oh gosh, look at her house, look at her this, look at her that. And then nobody really knows what's going on inside those walls.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my 22-year marriage, people thought we had the greatest marriage ever. Beautiful house. You guys are always, there's travel involved and there's this and that. And you just don't know.
I know. You don't know what's going on till people are vulnerable and share. So that's awesome that you have a program like that gives people the opportunity to heal, basically. So where are you now? Tell us about what you're doing. And obviously we know who you're serving, but how do you go about that? I know I mentioned earlier that you have an online program, but can you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the program is called Vulnerability Warrior, and I have historically taught it. It's been online, but I've taught it live. So every week I've taught it, an hour a week, and then there's homework that they do. And I'm actually in the process of making that a self-study course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And changing the price up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will still do live workshops, around Vulnerability Warrior. But the great thing about Vulnerability Warrior, and one of the things that I have most recently discovered, I've always thought about it, like you said, going through transition, and whether that's, death of a loved one or divorce or loss of a job or empty nest or whatever. But I've had several people who have had great success and they've hit an upper limit, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get beyond this upper limit? And usually what that is around the perfection aspect.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not, Vulnerability Warrior isn't just about the negative things that have happened in our life. It can be where you've had some amazing success and you've hit this threshold that you just can't get beyond, or this sense of, there's got to be something else. What else is out there? And so, yeah, the people who have been in those situations have really loved the program as well.
Oh, I bet. I never even really thought much about that, but there's got to be a lot of people out there that, yeah, you hit that threshold and it's like, well, now what? How do I get beyond this? And people can learn so much from other people because they're on the outside looking in instead of like enmeshed in what's going on at the moment.
Yeah.
I bet that's really interesting work.
It's great. And to be able to take that, not just from, and I do individual coaching too, and that sort of thing, but, to be able to take that into the business environment and use it in the business realm as well. One of the quotes that I use a lot of times when I'm speaking is, leadership is not about leading people. It's about influencing them. And in order to influence them, you have to connect with them.
So true.
Yeah.
That's great.
And, how do you connect with them? The best way to connect with people is, through your personal story, through your vulnerability, through your authenticity.
Absolutely. So tell me about your Love is My True North.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. A couple of years ago, going through the election, and everybody was being so ugly to each other on social media and everything. And obviously with all of my personal development work, I just was like, I am not getting in the middle of all of that stuff.
Yeah, smart.
And there was a thread that came across on my Facebook feed, and people were just being so ugly. And it was like I just had this divine download, and I posted #love is my true north. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love that phrase. That's fantastic. And I look it up, and the URL was available.
Oh, you're kidding me.
And I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this? Because this is just perfect. It's in alignment with what I do. It's in alignment with what I believe. And so I sat on it for a while. And then earlier this year, I rolled out a product line with Love is My True North. So there's t-shirts and bags and coffee mugs and hoodies, and it will continue to expand. I want to do some journals and some things like that with it as well. Oh,
awesome. So if the listener goes to your website, they'd be able to find the shop there, or is it a different?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. If you go to angelawstillwell.com/shop, SHOP, you'll find the products that are there, and the products are always, there's always new stuff that's added. So, yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. And I'll make sure in the show notes that all this information will be there, so the listeners can go there and just have a live link right to your website and your shop. So,
thank you.
Oh, you bet. That's amazing that you just got that download one day. The URL is available, and look what happened. And that's just been within the last year.
Yeah, and it's funny because Vulnerability Warrior was the same way. I was talking with someone, and that phrase popped in our heads, and the URL was available. And same thing with Untapped Strengths. It was like, okay, this is meant to be. Boom, boom. And like, I'm sitting right there at a lunch with a friend of mine, and he goes, Untapped Strengths, I really like that. And I pull up the URL, and it was available, and I purchased it right there at the table while we were having lunch.
Good for you. That's great. It really is. Oh, gosh. Yeah, it was meant to be. There's no other way to look at it.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, your career just sounds wonderful because even the fact that you started off as a writer and then the whole storytelling aspect is a huge part of what you do today. I mean, you've connected the dots beautifully from where you started to where you are now. So that's so amazing.
It's funny because the writing and the freelance consulting and all started after I had multiple other careers. And yet in those other careers, I was really doing a lot of the coaching and consulting work already. So there's like this common thread throughout, my whole adulthood.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. That really is. We're definitely doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that makes it a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one question that I ask all my guests. So you just have to bear with me. But what is one sentence of advice you'd tell your younger self if you could go back in time?
Stay the course and remember to always love yourself.
That's beautiful. Perfect advice for anybody, right?
Yeah.
I like that. Well, Angela, thank you so much for being a guest on my show today. It's just amazing to think about the vulnerability warrior. And then I love your Love is My True North. I'm going to go on there right now and check out all your product line. It's just exciting to how just things are working and connecting and falling into place like year after year for you. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I've loved being on here with you and can't wait to hear more from your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me today. This episode is brought to you by my book, The Graceful Advocate, Taking Control of Your Life After a Diagnosis of Thyroid Disease. You can find it currently on Amazon. I love it because my friends call it a purse book. They keep it with them when they go to the pharmacy, grocery store, or even to the doctor's office. It's a great little guide to keep you on track and informed. I can't wait for next week when I get to see you back on the pod. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate you so much. If you ever need someone to chat with about your healing journey, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me through my website at maureenlake.com.